I did not think this was possible necessarily, especially after the campaign season and the Republican primary. But somehow Donald Trump has united the Republican Party. Believe it or not, it seems like Donald Trump has succeeded in uniting the Republican Party right now, at least for right now. Now, how did he do that? With his Supreme Court pick, with picking Neil Gorsuch, because from everywhere I've seen, Republicans, conservatives, moderates, libertarians, all these different aspects of the Republican Party are pretty much united in agreement that they love this pick. And the Democrats are united in being against it, but that's just because, he's Trump and they're going to be against everything that Trump does. This is Beyond Reason Radio. A little news headline there for you that is definitely beyond reason. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason through it all. And we have a lot of stuff to get to. I'm going to get to all the stuff with the SCOTUS pick. I'm also going to get to what Trump did today. He did something very, very good today. I think maybe the office is already starting to humble him a little bit, hopefully. It seems to do that to people. Trump is not a very humble person, obviously, but it seems if today is an aspect of that, maybe the office is starting to humble him. And we have a lot more stuff to get to. The Democrats are becoming desperate in trying to block pretty much everything Trump does, it seems like. Not only are they saying they're going to try to block and filibuster the Supreme Court nominee, but they're also talking about blocking Betsy DeVos, who is up for education secretary, and we all know why they're trying to do that. So we're going to talk about that as well. By the way, we have Tom Benson in the control room producing for me. Bless his heart, he comes in this late just to produce for me, and I appreciate that.
Betsy DeVos has lost 2 Senate Republicans.
Yeah, I know.
So what does she need, 60 to be confirmed?
Well, it depends, but okay. Yes, they have to get it out of committee first, and then. But what's happening is the Democrats are boycotting a lot of these confirmation hearings. So they're not even showing up because they're trying to just completely delay the process. Yeah. But I want to get into that later because they're missing the point why we want Betsy DeVos. We want her because she's pro-school choice. People say she's not qualified. She's never been really a part of the public education system and yada, yada. That's the point.
Yeah.
That's why we like her, because she has been a part, separate from that, because she is pro-school choice and that's what we want. That's what we need. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But speaking of things that are beyond reason, I had to start with something I found. And I actually talked about it in a little video I put out there on social media. You can share it with your friends or whatever earlier today. And it kind of goes in line with what's going on with the Supreme Court pick, why the Supreme Court pick is so important, why the Supreme Court is so important, but where politics has come today. I just happened to find this. I was browsing around different sites and everything. And I went to the website, theweek.com, based off the magazine The Week. And this was like front and center on that site by a guy by the name of Ryan Cooper. It says this is the headline. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this in the coming years, unfortunately, because this is where we are. The headline is "The Case Against the American Constitution." The case against the American Constitution. Now, Democrats and leftists have never been too big of fans of the Constitution, although they're fans of it when it seems to benefit them. They talk about how, the immigration ban, for instance, that Trump put in effect this week, it's unconstitutional. They'll throw that out there when it's convenient for them. They love to use the words unconstitutional when it's convenient for them. But deep down, they haven't had too much of an affinity for it. And the reasons why are actually in this article. But this is pretty bold. And this isn't the first time I've seen something. There's other articles like this that I've seen in the past couple of years. But this is pretty bold because it's straight up saying we need to get rid of the Constitution. Basically what it's saying. The case against the Constitution. I read an article last year that talked about how we should have never declared independence from Britain. That it would have been better if we just stayed with Britain. So it's same kind of stuff. And I wanted to go through this before we get into the Republican-Democrat reaction of the SCOTUS pick, before we get into what the Democrats are doing, and there's some other stuff that's going on as well. I wanted to really get into this because this is the future. This is important, and this is where the left is going to go in the next few years, unfortunately. And I'm going to defend the Constitution because, you all know I read a lot of history, but probably the history I love to read the most is that era around forming the Constitution. I love revolutionary history, World War II history, all that stuff, Civil War history as well, but I really, really get into that whole time right after we declared independence. The Articles of Confederation were not working. James Madison got together to try to get this constitutional convention together. They got George Washington to come. There was a bunch of debate. That whole time period of the Constitutional Convention, it fascinates me. It fascinates me. And there's some really good books out there that I could recommend as well. Like there's one called James Madison and the Struggle for the Bill of Rights. Great book on that whole time period. I would definitely recommend it. But I wanted to go through this because I want to defend the Constitution. Because I hope they realize what they're doing, the people that are against it. Because what are they going to replace it with? They never really talk about what they're going to replace it with. And that's what's really scary, because what they would replace it with, even though they don't think so, would be incredibly damaging to freedom, the future of freedom for the individual. But this is what he says in the article. This is by Ryan Cooper, which is just crazy. This is what he said. He says the Constitution is janky. Is that a word? Janky? Janky. I kind of like it. Janky. The Constitution is janky. It's antiquated. It's poorly designed. And it's falling apart before our very eyes. That's what he says. He says, I'll concede there was indeed a time hundreds of years ago when the Constitution was briefly and for its era. So he's not even saying that it was good even in the past 100 years. A halfway decent first stab at the workable democratic political system for the northern states. This is where he goes. So he just bashes it one end to the other. He said, still, it only got close to systematically democratic with Reconstruction amendments, half of which were promptly ignored for 90 years. It's not exactly true, but okay. So that's usually where they go first, is the race aspect, the racism part, because there was slavery in this country in the beginning. Although there was slavery in the history of mankind way before the Constitution, and the Constitution and Declaration of Independence were steps towards ending slavery. They never mention that part. But this is what he says, and he's saying this because Trump's Supreme Court pick, Gorsuch, wants to interpret the Constitution as it was written, which is how you should do it. That's what you write it. When you write a document, you expect it to be interpreted the way you meant it when you wrote it. But they don't want to do that. So now they're just totally, instead of trying to change the Constitution, they just are now to the point where they're attacking the Constitution. I guarantee you'll see this more. He says this: consider the Senate. The Constitution requires that the body vote to approve a law before it can reach the president's desk. Each state gets 2 votes, even though states vary vastly in population. Today, California has about 67 times the population of Wyoming, but the same 2 Senate seats. Yes, there was a reason why they did that. It's called states' rights, federalism. He has to know this. He says, and this is all, his point here is that the Constitution is undemocratic. That's what they always say. It should be democratic. And then I love that these are the same people that would say, oh, we should be more like Britain or something, even though their prime minister is not elected by the people at all. But, that aside, says constitutional apologists justify this with a lot of piffle. What is with these words?
I say that. Yes. I said to my wife just this morning over our tea, we need some more piffle, honey.
Junkie and piffle. I love it. I love it, what this guy is saying. Piffle about how the Senate is supposed to be the cooling saucer against the hot-heated House of Representatives. In reality, the Senate is the product of a bare-knuckled political power play by the smaller states as they existed in the 1780s. They wanted unfair overrepresentation as the price of joining the new nation, and they got it. A decentralized government that delegates much authority to national subregions is one thing, but there is no possible justification for allowing certain depopulated states to wield dozens of times more influence than over national policy due to sheer coincidence of rapidly shifting popular distribution. Now, why is he incredibly wrong on this? He's wrong on this because the states, those small states, didn't want people in bigger states just because they had bigger populations to dictate how they lived their lives in the smaller state. So they wanted to enshrine that minorities, these are all the people that like minority rights. Well, a smaller state is a part of a minority, but it was to protect the rights of that minority against the tyranny of the majority. What he wants is the tyranny of the majority, is what he wants. And what he wants, and what they always want, and to replace the Constitution, is more government power. More centralized control by the government. That is always the criticism of the Constitution, is it doesn't give enough power to the central government, and always their solution is to give more power to the central government. But when you do, he says it's anti-democratic, okay? For one thing, we're not a democracy, we're a republic, and there's a reason why we're a republic, because we weren't about... Democracies can also be tyrannies as well. It can be the tyranny of the majority, the 51% over the 49%, for instance. We're a republic because the government was limited on purpose because it wasn't about the tyranny of the majority. It was about the rights of the individual. But he won't say that here. His next point, the Constitution's separations of powers is a boondoggle. It says in a parliamentary democracy, the executive power is exercised by the winning coalition in the legislature. Yes, and usually the prime minister is not elected by the people. That's very undemocratic, is it not? Is it not? Oh, wait, so you want another undemocratic system. That's how it should work. In an American-style presidential democracy, the executive is elected separately. But then he says the executive has steadily become more powerful, basically since FDR. He says a more complex and urbanized society means governance needs to be agile, and deliberative legislatures are not well suited for that of the best of times. Notice what he is doing there. He is once again wants more control by the central government to be agile in the lives of individuals. Now, why does he want that? Why is our government not do that? Why is our government not supposed to do that? Why is it supposed to be hard to make laws? Why is it that in some ways it was supposed to be a boondoggle? And the reason why the separations and powers was supposed to be a boondoggle, because it was supposed to be difficult to make laws and to change things. Why? Because when the government is constantly making laws, they are encroaching on the liberty of the individual. The whole purpose of this is to get the government out of the way of a free society, so individuals and groups in a society could do what they want without government encroachment. But what he's saying is that's outdated. What he's saying is because the way our population is now, we need more government encroachment in the lives of individuals, in the lives of groups, in the lives of you. The government to tell you what to do is what he wants. That's what they always want. Trust me on this. When we get back, I'll share his last point. Because what he says next is the Constitution is basically impossible to fix. And his main point in that is we should get rid of it. What do you think about this? The reason I brought this up is because it has to be defended. So when we get back, I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about why the Constitution needs to stay in place and why it is so important. Why it was put together and why it still works. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. I'm getting a bunch of comments on Facebook Live as well. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your voice of reason. Through all of this, it is Beyond Reason, and we will be right back.
You want to listen to Beyond Reason Radio live on your smartphone? Download the Beyond Reason Radio app now. Available in the Google Play or Apple App Stores.
The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I was just going over this article by a guy named Ryan Cooper in theweek.com where he makes the argument against the Constitution. But since I'm the voice of reason and the voice of truth, I have to make the argument for the Constitution. You know, when you're reading his take, you would think that the founders were just a bunch of bumbling fools who were trying to come up with something that worked, and they just kind of put something together. It's kind of old and antiquated, and it's not really based on much, and just compromise, and it's completely ignorant of the time period. The reason why a lot of the principles that were put forth in the Constitution, all you have to do is read the Federalist Papers to get a lot of this, was borrowed from philosophers of their time and before their time, like John Locke. And it was based on the principles of, well, private property rights, for one. The right to life, liberty, and property. That the government, and this is why it is so important to talk about this stuff, because we never talk about the role of government anymore. It's always the government's too big, government's too small kind of thing. And, you know, that's an interesting debate, but we have to get into the main issue, the role of government. What is the role of government? Well, the role of government in a free society is merely to protect the rights of the people, of the individual and of minority groups and of people and your property, your rights that were given to you by God. That was it. But when you read stuff like this, they don't believe that that's the government's job anymore, because they believe society has evolved way too much, and we need the government to do more than just protect our rights because it's just too complicated. And in fact, that's the argument against a bigger government, because society is extremely complex and there is no centralized power who can control it all. Anytime a centralized power tries to control a complex, free society of free individuals making millions of different decisions every day in a free market, they screw it up because it's impossible to do. But he's saying that they need to be more control of these things. And he would probably deny a lot of this, but that's basically what he's saying when you read this stuff. He wants a bigger government that's more agile, that helps the needs of the people and goes beyond the rights of the people and takes care of the people. But always be afraid when someone promises to take care of you, they're also promising to have control over you. And basically, people who don't want the Constitution don't like a free society. And the founders knew that. They based it on these philosophical principles, these eternal truths. That's why it still works today, because it's based on eternal truths, a lot of it, the fundamental principles. Was it perfect? Of course not. That's why they had to add a Bill of Rights. There was a much heated debate at the beginning of the Constitution between Patrick Henry and James Madison over just that. And basically they promised they would put in a Bill of Rights so the Anti-Federalists would support the Constitution, so it would protect the rights once again, limit the government even more. And he even talks about in this, the Constitution, one good thing about the Constitution is the Bill of Rights. But the Bill of Rights was something that also limited the government even more. The argument from the Anti-Federalists for the Bill of Rights was that the government was still too big and too powerful. So why he likes the Bill of Rights, I don't know. I don't really understand. But he says this: the Constitution is also impossible to change, requiring a 2/3 vote in the House and Senate and ratification by 3/4 of the states. Well, that was done on purpose as well. It was on purpose to be hard. It was supposed to be hard. Why? Why was it meant to be hard? Because they believed that the individual, that local communities knew what was best for their communities more than a centralized power, a faraway centralized power. That's not what he believes, apparently. He doesn't think that you know what's best for your life. He thinks that an agile, bigger, flexible government knows better for how you should govern your life. That is how you get towards tyranny of one form or another. What we're now in is what Alexis de Tocqueville called a soft tyranny. And he predicted this, that we would bury ourselves in laws because we would believe that the government was more responsible for these things. That the government was responsible not only for protecting your rights, but for taking care of you. But what happens, like I said, if they try to take care of you, they also have more control over you. But the left is going to do this. And we're even going to talk about with the SCOTUS nominee for the Supreme Court nominee by Trump, what the Democrats are saying. It's kind of similar to this kind of stuff. Their arguments are always the same. They say they're for protecting rights or say they're fighting for the right of so-and-so, but they're not fighting for the rights of someone. They're fighting for basically more power by them over individuals. I have a call here from Dusty in Apopka. Dusty, what do you think about all this?
Mike, I couldn't have said it better myself. You hit the nail right on the head. It's all about the individual. The Constitution was set up to protect our rights as individuals. If you take that away, you have tyranny and you have corruption in the worst kind of ways.
You know, you bring up a good point, too, about corruption. Because you're right. It would also bring about corruption because anytime you give more power to people from a faraway land, it's going to breed corruption because money and power always seems to breed corruption in that way. And this was another way to prevent corruption because it limited the power of the government.
It set in place checks and balances so that one portion of the government could not dictate over the other two and could not take away an individual's rights, and that way it protects our individual freedoms.
Right. Thank you, Dusty, so much for your call. I could not agree with you more. And he's right. And, you know, this guy just says, well, the separation of powers, that's actually just a boondoggle. A boondoggle is what he says, and it shouldn't be that way. Now, was the Constitution perfect in the beginning? No. Because government is imperfect, because people are imperfect. That was kind of one of the points of limiting government in the first place, was because they understood that people were imperfect and that no government could create, you know, a utopia was impossible to create. So the best way to have a good society was a free society where individuals had control over their own lives. But they even admitted government wasn't imperfect, which is why they wanted to limit government, and which is why they also put in the Bill of Rights, because they understood government wasn't perfect. But it did need changes. And what I would encourage you to do is read a book by Randy Barnett that's called Our Republican Constitution. He goes over this. And there was really the one thing that was really missing. Well, there was two things that were missing in the Constitution in the beginning, which were fixed. One was the Bill of Rights. So they put in the Bill of Rights, although some argue that the Bill of Rights were counterintuitive because the Bill of Rights, the Constitution really doesn't give the government the power to encroach on those rights in the first place. They had specific enumerated powers. So really it was just a reinforcement. But the Bill of Rights, but then later, based on the same principles that founded our country, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, the amendments ending slavery and protecting the right of the vote and protecting, you know, and those kind of things needed to be added later. But those were also based on the original principles of limited government in the Constitution. And I believe in amending the Constitution now, but it's still based on those same principles. But he wants to get rid of it entirely because he thinks the principles themselves are flawed. Have another call here real quick. We'll take a quick call before we take a break. Brad in Winter Park. Brad, what do you think about this?
Oh, yes. I've actually done some research on this in my political studies, and the common knowledge is even with college professors who are left-wing themselves, they use the word fascist a lot, and they always attach right-wing to it. Well, I did a little investigating, and if you look at the Merriam-Webster dictionary for the definition of fascism, there's no such term right-wing in there.
Of course
if you look
not.
at modern dictionaries, though, do you know what they've done? Because when dictionaries update every few years,
right.
Who do they go to? They go to professors.
Oh,
they
geez.
put the words right-wing in there.
Do they really?
Yes, and I looked at it and I said,
Wow.
oh, my God. But here's the thing. You know why it's dangerous? Because in reality, socialism and fascism are married. Because when you look at the biggest murderous fascist dictators, Mao, Chavez, Mussolini, they're all part of socialist or communist governments. And, of course, communism is a type of socialism. So here's the thing. we as Republicans, or just conservatives in general, we need to start really infiltrating the web, because there's a brainwashing going on where everyone thinks Republicans are. And Obama himself did fascist things. You remember when he went after the Little Sisters of the Poor, tried to force them to provide contraception? That's a fascist government act.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
and you're struck him down.
Yeah, you're exactly right, because I mean, the most known fascist dictatorship ever in history is Nazis. Well, Nazi stands for National Socialism.
Yes.
And what National Socialism was the government basically dictating a lot to the economy, but it wasn't controlling the means of production, but it still dictated a lot of the economy. And it was just a different form of socialism than straight up communism and straight up socialism. But it's still, like you said, they're still both on the left side. True right wing is libertarianism.
Correct. Yet all college professors are indoctrinating our vulnerable 18-year-old freshmen to think that. This is such a scandal in education that we need to shout it to the rooftops, because, like I said, if you can understand the foundations, people will run from the modern-day left-wing Democrat Party. They'll run from it when they realize that it's all about government control.
Thank you, Brad. You are right on very much. A good book to read. I'm recommending tons of books today, apparently, but a good book to read that talks in depth about how fascism, what fascism really is, because people say fascism now and they think, oh, that means you hate Jews or something. You want to kill minorities. Well, that's not what fascism was originally. The Nazis took it to that extreme, but that's not really what fascism is. So what I want you to do is I want you to read Ayn Rand's book, Capitalism. She has several chapters in that book about fascism and how fascism has been in the United States as well, and what economic fascism really is. A great book to educate yourself on that as well. Okay, we have to get into, in the next segment, the Republican reaction, the Democrat reaction of the Supreme Court pick by Donald Trump. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes.
This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
So Donald Trump has done it somehow, at least for the week. Donald Trump, President Trump. Still sounds weird to say President Trump. I have to admit that. But President Trump has united the Republican Party, united conservatives, moderates, and libertarians somehow because of his pick for the Supreme Court. I seem to really like the pick. There's a great article that Gorsuch, his pick, wrote in it's in the National Review from a few years ago, where he talks about judicial philosophy and how it's bad that we want moral decisions to be solved by the bench. If we have time, maybe I'll get into it a little bit later. But I thought I would play audio from the Republicans. These are all really great conservatives who support this pick by Donald Trump. I mean, this was the biggest issue for a lot of conservatives, including myself, in voting for Trump in November, and they were a little skeptical that he would they were skeptical that he would keep his promise. But it seems like he has kept his promise. And when I hear a lot of these noted conservatives who I trust in this regard, because I'm not an expert on this guy. I mean, I've done a lot of research on him recently, and his own writings make me a fan of him. But I'm going to go to other people who are much more experts on this, who I trust in these matters, and they all seem to like him as well. And it's just amazing that Trump's been able to do this. So, the first cut I have is from Andrew Napolitano, Judge Napolitano. I love him, great libertarian. Love his writings, love his books, and he's always on Fox, and I agree with him so much. But he's definitely an expert in this regard, in this area, and this is what he had to say about Trump's pick.
Judge Gorsuch was high on the list of those of us advising the president who wanted somebody very, very close to Justice Scalia, faithful to the Constitution, faithful to the original meaning of the Constitution, believing that the Supreme Court can't stretch the Constitution, and generally, this warms my heart, Brian, generally skeptical of the government, not giving the government a pass. Justice Scalia was that way, Judge Gorsuch is that way.
So just high praise from Judge Napolitano, who's very, very critical of, he's not afraid to say being critical when he's been critical of Trump in the past. He's not afraid to go against the mainstream on stuff, but he seems to really like this pick. Next, I believe, is Senator Mike Lee. I mean, who's more of a constitutionalist than Senator Mike Lee? A lot of people thought he should have been Trump's pick for Supreme Court, and he was on Mark Levin's radio show yesterday, and this is what he said about Trump's pick.
I'm absolutely ecstatic about this pick. I'm a lawyer. That's what I did before I became a senator. I'm still a lawyer at heart. I've appeared in front of Judge Gorsuch, and I can say from firsthand experience he's an extraordinary judge. We're very lucky to have this nomination, and I look forward to being part of the effort to get him confirmed, which is going to succeed.
So there we go. He's very, very excited about it, very happy about it. Another person I really trust in these matters. It's just amazing. It just seems like the more we go through this, that Trump made a good pick. The next person, Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz commented right after this, and this is what he said about it.
Today was the most important decision President Trump has made in the first 2 weeks serving in office. During the campaign, he promised the American people that he would nominate a principled constitutionalist to replace Justice Scalia. And tonight, President Trump honored that commitment. He followed through on the commitment he made. I think Judge Gorsuch is a home run.
All right, so there you go, a home run. That's what Ted Cruz said about it. Another person praising. Now, I actually have some audio of a Democrat, Alan Dershowitz, who really is, he likes, well, this is what he said about Gorsuch, and then I'll get into some things he has a problem with the pick, but it has nothing to do with Gorsuch himself, has other reasons, but this is what he said about him.
Well, he was at Harvard when I was at Harvard. I don't have any recollection of him, but he had a very distinguished background. His record is superb. The Democrats cannot oppose him on the basis of lack of qualifications.
So there you go. He said that on qualifications you can't oppose him. Now he thinks the Democrats should oppose him because they blocked Obama's pick, and he's they should have let Garland get the pick or whatever. And we're not going to get into that. It's just politics, really. But I mean, in terms of uniting the Republican Party around someone, I mean, those are not the only people who commented on this. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, more of a moderate, said, like Justice Scalia, Gorsuch understands the constitutional limits on the authority of the federal judge, and that duty of a judge is to apply the law even-handedly, without fear or favor, and not rule based on one's empathy with a party in case. Loves the pick, loves the kick. And then you have House Speaker Paul Ryan, someone who's been critical of Trump in the past, also really likes his picks. Paul Ryan said Trump had fulfilled his campaign pledge to nominate a judge who has demonstrated loyalty to the Constitution and a strong commitment to life. And he said Gorsuch is a phenomenal choice by the president. And then someone who's more libertarian in the Republican Party, Rand Paul, says, I congratulate President Trump for nominating a conservative jurist with outstanding credentials and experience to the Supreme Court. So I just gave you moderates. I just gave you the House. I just gave you the Senate. I just gave you conservatives and even a Democrat who all agree that this pick by Trump is a really, really good pick. It seems like Trump got this one right. A lot of people were really skeptical of this, but they held their nose, they voted for Trump, and they made it a big deal because they believe that he was the right pick. Now, I wanted to read, before we take a break here, just to give you an idea of how Gorsuch thinks. He wrote in the National Review in 2005, he wrote this. It's called Liberals and Lawsuits. And this is what he thinks about how a justice should work, about how being a judge should work, about the Supreme Court and all this stuff. This is what he said. He said, this overweening addiction to the courtroom as the place to debate social policy is bad for the country and bad for the judiciary. Couldn't agree more. In the legislative arena, especially when the country is closely divided, compromises tend to be the rule to rule the day. But when judges rule this or that policy unconstitutional, there's little room for compromise. One side must win, the other must lose. In constitutional litigation, two experiments and pilot programs, real-world laboratories in which ideas can be assessed on the results they produce, are not possible. Ideas are tested only in the abstract world of legal briefs and lawyers' arguments. As a society, we lose the benefit of the give and take of the political process and the flexibility of social experimentation that only the elected branches can provide. Exactly what he's saying. He says it's up to the judiciary to interpret the law, not make political decision, and not get involved in these moral and political issues, because that's not the role of the judiciary. I couldn't agree more. That's from Gorsuch himself. Couldn't agree more. Seems like a solid pick to me, but of course, the Democrats are going to oppose him anyways because it's Trump and because they're upset because the Republicans blocked Obama's pick. Well, too bad. We're going to get this guy in there. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeartRadio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast.
The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffee is back on the air.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. I'm just looking up at the TV screen. And, I talked about on yesterday's show that we're in the era of hysteria where we protest and riot over everything. Well, now there's protests on the Berkeley campus, the UC Berkeley campus, because a Breitbart editor was talking. So not only are they protesting, but they're like burning stuff, and it's just stupid. I mean, it's just ridiculous. I'm all for disagreements and debate, but that's not what they want. They say they believe in freedom of speech. They say they're doing this to protect freedom. But are they really? Isn't that just kind of trying to shut out and scare people out of their ideas? And they say we're the ones that are intolerant. Just crazy to me. All right, and then speaking of this, the Democrats over Donald Trump's Supreme Court pick. So all the Republicans seem to be united. They really like this guy, but the Democrats are still bitter. They say they're going to oppose it. This might be pretty dumb politically because they'll just use the nuclear option and get him passed, and then then the next time it's just going to seem even more foolish. But Nancy Pelosi, right after the pick, she was on CNN last night, and she had some very strange comments about this Supreme Court pick. Let's hear what she had to say about this.
The president, in his first appointment to the court, and hopefully his only appointment to the court, has appointed someone who has come down on the side of corporate America versus class action suits on securities fraud. He's come down against employees' rights, clean air, clean water, food safety, safety in medicine, and the rest. If you care about that for your children, he's not your guy. Gabby Giffords' group, the Group for Responsible Solutions relating to gun safety, said that he comes down on the side of felons over gun safety. Hostile to women's reproductive rights. Hobby Lobby case, for example. The list goes on and on. Criticized progressives for bringing cases that relate to LGBT progress, taking those cases to the courts. What saddens me the most as a mom and a grandmother, though, is his hostility toward children in school, children with autism. He has ruled that they don't have the same rights under the IDEA, the children that they could reach their intellectual and social advancement under the law. He has said that doesn't apply to them. He's come down against them under the ADA as well, and again under IDEA. So it's a very hostile appointment. Hill Fellow, well met, lovely family, I'm sure. But as far as your family is concerned, and all of if you breathe air, drink water, eat food, take medicine, or in any other way interact with the courts, this is a very bad decision, well outside the mainstream of American legal thought.
So the end of that is just amazing. If you breathe air, drink water, take medicine, you should be very against this guy. Notice that nothing she said had anything to do with, interpreting the law, interpreting the Constitution as it was intended to be interpreted. Isn't that the point of a judge? To make judgments based on the law? Oh, he sides with corporations over individuals. It's not about siding with. Justice is blind. That means you side with the law. You don't look at corporation, individual, whatever, medicine, LGBT. You look at the law. Craziness. Chuck Schumer also had some comments about this. This is what he said about the appointment.
Judge Neil Gorsuch, throughout his career, has repeatedly sided with corporations over working people, demonstrated a hostility to women's rights, and most troubling, viewed to an ideological approach to jurisprudence that makes me skeptical that he can be a strong and independent justice on the court. Given that record, I have very serious doubts that Judge Neil Gorsuch is up to the job. Mr. President, Madam President, the Supreme Court now rests in delicate balance. We cannot allow it to be further captured by corporate influence.
We're going to get him in anyway.
By executive overreach. The Senate has a responsibility to weigh this nominee with the highest level of scrutiny, to have an exhaustive, robust, and comprehensive
that's
debate
what you want.
On Judge
While you
Gorsuch's
boycott
fitness
other
to be
nominations.
a Supreme Court justice. We Democrats will ensure that it does.
No, you won't. We're going to get him in there anyway. By the way, he had no problems with any of that when he was part of the unanimous vote to get him in the appeals court. Oh, now it's a problem. He didn't have a problem before. Really? Jeez. Oh, man. I guess, the Democrats want to be the party of no now. They accuse the Republicans of that. Now the Democrats of that. So there we go. The Democrats have gone crazy. The age of hysteria continues on. I wanted to end the show with something that I thought was very a good story today, and something that I'm really glad President Trump did. President Trump traveled today to Delaware to receive remains of the Navy SEAL that was killed in the raid. The one Navy SEAL who was killed, I think the only military officer who has been killed under Trump's presidency. And Trump decided, and he did this secretly, he didn't do it with a whole lot of fanfare, which is kind of unlike Trump, to go and make sure he was there to honor the dead Navy SEAL who was killed, who made the ultimate sacrifice for his country. And Trump is usually not known for being humble. Trump is usually, not known for being low-key. But sometimes I think, and I prayed this when he got into office, I think the office of the presidency can humble people. I think it's humbled presidents in the past. And I'm hoping that this is evidence that the office, the weight of the office, has humbled President Trump. And, with all the criticisms of Trump, when he does stuff like this, and he does it like this quite a bit, behind the scenes, he called the husband of the officer killed here locally in Orlando. I think it shows that deep down he does care about the country. He's not this brutal fascist dictator guy that the Democrats say, but he really loves and cares about the real people, the normal people, the everyday people of this country. And I thought that was a good thing by Trump to do. I hope that is very presidential. I hope to see more of that from him, and I think we will. This is Beyond Reason Radio. Thank you all for joining me. If you missed any of the show, make sure to catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. I will be back Friday night. Stay tuned. Send me a friend request on Facebook. Find out all the information about the show, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Well,